see folks are still trickling in, but I have 1 p.m. Eastern, so we can go ahead and kick off our call today, and we will welcome folks as they continue to join. So welcome back to another week of the Superior Health COVID-19 Nursing Home Leadership Roundtable. I hope you all had a wonderful Thanksgiving and were able to enjoy hopefully some time away. I know this year has just been unrelenting. It seems like it's been one thing after another. So I'm sure time with family, time with friends, and time away from work was very well deserved and hopefully enjoyed too. So my name is Kelsey Ostergren. I know a lot of you probably know us by now, but I am joined by my program co-leads, Kim Heft and Jerry Hineker. So today, Kim and I are really just going to be leading a discussion with all of you about holiday celebrations and visitations. So this is your forewarning that we are expecting you to all participate. We may or may not be calling on you, so just heads up. We really just want this, again, to be an open dialogue, hear how things went with Thanksgiving, what you plan to change, if anything, for the upcoming holidays, and just really share any ideas or challenges that you have to get ideas from other folks. Feel free to unmute your phones and contribute, or if you're more comfortable, you can always use the chat box to put in thoughts or questions or comments as well. So Jerry's going to post a link to our slides in chat. And we will also, as we always do, have a short evaluation form at the end of the session that we would appreciate your feedback on. All right, so these are our objectives for our session today. As I alluded to previously, we will spend some time just talking about Thanksgiving, talking a little bit about what the current visitation guidelines are, and then what you guys are planning for the upcoming holidays. I know that a lot of this is probably very tradition-based, so like what you've done in the past might be what you do again. But if we're able to have an open discussion about this, I think it would be really interesting to hear what each facility is doing or planning, and maybe you'll get some new ideas as well. We'll also share a few resources that you might find helpful to improve your visitations during what could be a very busy holiday season. All right, so with that, we come to our first question. So how did Thanksgiving go? Is there something that worked well? Are there things that maybe were a challenge for you? Anything you want to share related to Thanksgiving in your facility?
Did anyone maybe increase their core infection control protocols or processes? Did you maybe, I don't know, put out increased hand sanitizer in the area? Maybe had your staff cleaning high touch areas more? Things of that nature. How'd it go? Were the families wearing masks?
You guys are quiet today. I know there was activities going on in your buildings during last week. Did you have any events for your residents? Did they include family members, friends?
If you weren't there, if you were the administrator or the director of nursing, let's say, or the infection preventionist, and you weren't there for Thanksgiving, okay, what phone calls did you get? that could maybe spark some interest. Who called you and said, uh-oh, we have an issue?
So Kim, we have a response from Jenna. She said that they saw a major increase in people leaving for greater than 24 hours. So this caused a lot of added stress for the supervisors to complete the return swabbing when residents came back. That was exactly what I was wondering, if there was a lot of people out of the nursing homes or the facilities, and what you saw when they came back.
That just even leads to maybe I'm jumping the gun here a little bit, but then come the next holiday, right? So maybe Jenna, you already thought through this after the December holiday, what, maybe you'll be more prepared on probably having to come in and swab residents. Yeah. You don't think about those things, do you? Get it.
And there's another comment. We continued with standard COVID screening for visitors. This included all visitors wearing masks. We did have some patients leave to be a family as well. Okay. Thanks for that comment. And yes, Jenna, I think your point is well taken about folks leaving the facility, and we'll talk about that in a little more detail as well. So definitely a busy time when folks are leaving the facility, maybe families are coming in to visit, but I think all of these different scenarios poses some increased transmission risks, as maybe our PPE, our hand hygiene isn't to the level that we might want it to be, especially if they're leaving the facility and going home. You never know who's in that home and what they've been exposed to coming into that day as well. Another comment from Jody, we had residents leave and they were tested on return. Really no real issues. Staff perform rapid tests as a task. Okay, awesome. Thanks, Jody.
I think Dana said, Dana, when you said you continued with our standard COVID screening for visitors, was that, when you mean standard, was that passive screening, or was that, I guess, for our active screening with your visitors? I just asked because I do wonder if I know that we can now do passive screening, but I wondered if maybe some of you would have went to the traditional active screening that we were doing before because of the holiday and the surge of people coming to visit.
Yeah, so Kim, there's a response there to your question. All visitors have to screen. They use a program on a tablet that takes their temp and asks symptom questions prior to entering the building.
Gotcha.
Awesome.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. So it sounds like, based on the comments that we've received, things went fairly well. I think noting the time and staffing component related to testing upon re-entry. And again, we'll talk about that in a little more detail. But I mean, it sounds like things for the most part went well. So I'm glad to hear that. I see another comment here from Jody. We changed our policies to reflect the new CDC standards of passive screening with signage, and they are no longer doing active screens. Well, thanks for sharing that, Jody. And for those that are doing screening, have you found that folks are compliant with doing that? Do you find that they're being honest with how they're answering questions if you have a staff there who's kind of monitoring that, or have there been some challenges with that in any way, shape, or form? So if I'm not mistaken, I feel like that was a comment that had come up on one of our prior calls. Somebody was sharing some frustrations that they don't always feel like folks are being honest with how they're responding to those. But, they're doing the screening, so they're checking that box and wearing the mask and coming in regardless. So I was just curious if that's something that you continued to see, or if perhaps that was an isolated incident or individual. But any thoughts on that? Yeah, so Jody says the process of passive screening staff have been very compliant with reporting of illness or exposure. That's wonderful, Jody. I'm glad to hear that. And I think really that's the key to this, right? Is we don't want to do the screening just as yep, we've done it. It's no, this is a screening for a reason, right? We need to figure out who's symptomatic, who's been exposed, and try to address those situations appropriately. So any additional thoughts about Thanksgiving or questions that maybe you ran into and want to know how other facilities are handling it, or maybe did handle it, and whether they would recommend that or not? All right, well, if you think of anything, feel free to put questions in the chat box. Obviously, our team is monitoring that, but it's a great opportunity for you to ask questions of your peers as well. Okay, Jody, has anybody DC'd masks based on transmission levels? So that is a very beautiful segue into our next slide. So I want to just kind of recap some visitation reminders, which I think really gets to the heart of Jody's question about masks. So again, just kind of as a reminder to recap, so this QSO memo was revised, released in September, and has kind of a handful of key points that I just wanted to reiterate. So if your community transmission is high, everybody should be wearing a mask. If your transmission level is something other than high, masks obviously are going to be the safest option, but a facility can choose not to require visitors to wear a face covering as long as you're not in an outbreak. Little caveat there, and we'll talk about that in more detail. The other piece here that I just want to call out, because I know that this still is a point of confusion, is as you're looking at community transmission levels, please make sure you're using community transmission metric, which is for healthcare settings, not the community level metric, which is for our non-healthcare folks. So when you're looking to figure out what your transmission level is, just make sure you're looking at the one that's intended for healthcare. And lastly, while visiting in the room or other designated visitation area in the facility, the resident and or visitor may choose not to wear a face covering. So I think with that, I want to turn back to Jody's question and just pitch that to the group. Has anybody stopped their mask use based on transmission levels? So feel free to give a thumbs up, thumbs down, yes, no in the chat box. Okay, a couple no's, 3 no's.
No, yeah.
Lots of no. Oh, one facility. So Vicky said they did. Kelly says we have not been at a high transmission, but don't plan on changing our masking until spring. Okay. Lots and lots of no's. So Vicky, if I can pick on you, since you seem to be our lone soldier who said yes, can you share a little bit about how that process has gone for you? And if there's any, I guess, things that folks should be aware of if and when they start to go down that path?
Well, yeah, I could just say that 3 days in, we had a positive resident. But she is someone that went out and, has continued to go out before that. And so it's really difficult to know if I'm certain it had no impact on that, but it sure put us right back into masks and goggles again. So.
Is that where you currently are right now, Vicky, is with the masks and the?
Yeah, we had one case.
Right.
Mhm.
But that's where you're,
And
okay.
yes, we are currently masked.
So, Vicky, when after you have completed this one, hopefully, knock on wood, right? One person outbreak, are you going to, if your community levels continue to be low, are you going to go back to no masks again?
Unfortunately, yes.
What? Okay.
I mean, okay, I just want to say I'm not 100% on board, but administration feels very strong that we need to take that route.
What are your community levels at right now?
We are moderate, actually.
We're at moderate. Okay.
And how has the communication gone, Vicky? I'm just curious because I'm trying to imagine you communicating to staff. We're wearing masks. Now we're not wearing masks. Now we're back to masks, and sort of the confusion that could potentially cause. Any remarks on how that's gone, or if there have been challenges with that?
That actually has not been so bad, because
Okay.
we have signage at the time clock, and then we send out blast messages, and we have not had a problem with that. It's on the message screens, on the monitors and stuff for everybody to see. And that hasn't been an issue.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that. And have you gotten pushback from staff at all in the instance currently that with an outbreak, you're sort of back to masks, or has that been fairly seamless given the requirements around outbreaks?
No, it's pretty good. Like I said, we made the staff go back to goggles as well, and that there's a little more of a fuss with that. They don't like the goggles.
Sure.
Mhm.
And Vicky, I think there's a question in chat. I think this is for you from Jody about, are you using surgical masks or N95?
No, we just surgical masks.
Thank you. And Jody, if that didn't answer your question, let us know. And Vicky, thank you so much for sharing your experience. I certainly don't mean to call you out, but with everybody else saying, no, they haven't done this, it's always nice to hear from somebody who's gone through it, what this process has looked like, and any challenges or bumps along the road that you've encountered.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, like I said, I would like to see them through the springtime, but I'm not the only one involved.
Sure. And I think to Angie's comment here in chat, their medical director suggesting even if they get out of high transmission that they continue, given that COVID's not the only thing right now with influenza and RSV and some of the other stuff that's going around. That was their sort of perspective. Yeah, she goes on to say, I do agree with this thinking, although I'm not certain others will. So yeah, it's certainly a challenge. And Vicky, I think you've highlighted that well, just the dichotomy between those who think masks should continue versus those who feel strongly they shouldn't. Awesome, great discussion on this. Any other thoughts or questions related to visitation, masks? So I do see a question in chat from Jody, and I, off the cuff, don't know the answer to this. So what does the data show about surgical masks preventing the spread of COVID-19? So I think what we can say is that a surgical mask is going to be better than nothing. It's not going to be as effective as an N95, but I don't have hard numbers or data to share. So I guess I'll pitch this question to the group. Does anybody have a good answer for Jody to this question? I actually just saw a really interesting infographic yesterday that was kind of like an XY chart, and it showed like no mask, cloth mask, surgical mask, and N95, down each side, and then said, if one person had it and the other person didn't, how long it would take for you to be infected. So I'll see if I can find that again and circulate it to this group, because I do think, there is research on this. It is coming out, but offhand, I don't have that. But that's a great question. All right, so we've touched on this a little bit, but I just want to revisit and share some of this information. So again, as we just kind of spoke through Vicky's example and just kind of using that scenario, again, facilities are allowed to allow visitors to forego a face covering when they come in, as long as you're not in an outbreak. An outbreak is just one single case. And so when you're in an outbreak, what does this mean? What does this look like? So residents, of course, should still be allowed to have visitors, but these folks should be made aware of the outbreak, be required to wear their face masks, regardless of what the transmission level is, and should really be going directly from the entrance of the building to wherever they're visiting. So whether that's a designated visiting area or the resident's room, they really should not be wandering around, interacting with other residents, anything that could potentially contribute to spread or be, an extra source of transmission. So during an outbreak, again, face covering should be worn by both the resident and the visitor, and just really try as much as you can to kind of limit where these folks are going and wandering. And I think Kim's kind of introductory question as we kicked off the session about cleaning and disinfecting the high touch areas, I think is even more important during an outbreak, but certainly for any of the spaces where folks are coming in and visiting, whether that is the residence room or a shared visitation space. So for those of you who have or are currently in an outbreak, what challenges have you encountered, or maybe what successes can you share about having visitors in your facility at this time? Do you find that when folks come to visit, if you share that you're in an outbreak, that they leave? Or does that not seem to deter them?
It looks like Jody has stated it has not impacted our visitors.
Wonderful. Okay, send out notifications and posted an entry, but they still visit. Awesome. And Angie's echoing those same comments. Outbreaks have not prevented it. Occasionally someone will make a choice not to visit, but that's rare. And then Sarah said both. They have some folks that prefer not to be in the building, even if it was a staff that was positive, and others are not phased.
Sure.
Which, I mean, I think is kind of a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it's really nice that families feel comfortable adhering to what we're requesting of them as they enter a building during an outbreak. And, on the flip side, I think that giving folks an option to not come if they don't feel comfortable certainly alleviates some additional potential for your staff or your residents to be exposed in the event that those folks may, have been exposed or could be pre-symptomatic or asymptomatic and be an added source for your outbreak. And I think to some extent at this point in the pandemic, folks are a little more comfortable with what COVID means, how to prevent it, what the disease course looks like. So maybe that fear that we had 2 years ago has minimized some, that, at that point, an outbreak might have been more scary. Whereas now it's just like, okay, yep, we got it. There's a case and we'll manage. So any other comments related to outbreaks before we move on? Okay. So for communal activities, which I'm sure in the holidays especially is going to be much more frequent occurrence. I just wanted to touch very briefly on this. For communal activities, it's of course safest for everybody to be wearing a face covering, though that is certainly not a requirement. And again, I think this is something that can be up to your determination at the facility level. You can certainly lean back on whatever your facility guidelines are just in general. And I know a lot of folks have said, nope, we're still doing masking regardless of transmission levels. So, for those who aren't, I think that could come into play as you're having conversations about this. If you're having 10 or 15 or 20 residents gathering, is that an instance where maybe we do want masks to avoid any sort of outbreak? All right, so just a few resources I wanted to share that our Superior Health team developed related to visitation. So there are 4 posters, and you can see a screenshot of one of them on the right side of the slide there. But these are all free. You can download them, print them, laminate them, hang them wherever you want. And there's 4 different ones. So there's one on general visitation, visitation during an outbreak, visitation during high community transmission, and then the 4th is reducing spread. So we've really touched on kind of all of those in our conversation so far. But, as we were having this discussion about the challenges we've encountered during Thanksgiving or during outbreaks, these may be really helpful tools if you wanted to do any type of education campaign with either families, visitors, or even your residents in the weeks, between now and our winter holidays. So feel free, take a peek at these, use them as you see fit. The link to access them is listed on the bottom of this slide. I know Jerry put the link to our slide deck in chat, so be sure you grab the PDF of today's presentation so you can download those and use them. And again, maybe it wouldn't hurt to have a handful of copies. So, if you move into high transmission, you can grab out that stack of flyers and post those around. Even if you wanted to print a stack and leave them at, the front desk or wherever you're doing your screenings, I think that's certainly an option as well. But use these however you see fit. There's no right or wrong way, but this is something we developed that we thought would be helpful for you. So hopefully you can put them to use. All right, so I wanted to circle back to residents leaving the facility. And I know there was a comment early on in our discussion today about residents who left the facility for more than 24 hours and kind of what that looked like in terms of management once they returned. And my assumption would be, though correct me if I'm wrong, that we will probably see an uptick in this occurrence during our winter holidays. So whether folks are leaving to celebrate Christmas or Hanukkah or whatever other holiday, this is a big time to be with family. So again, my sort of gut reaction would be this is probably going to be a more common occurrence over the next handful of weeks. So obviously, with our residents being allowed to leave the facility whenever they choose, we can't stop that. What we really can do, though, is sort of educate both our residents and our families so that we can try as best as we can to minimize the risk for that individual. So a couple things to note here, which we've touched on. The first is the use of face coverings. I think this is going to be particularly true for our residents who are high risk, as well as when we're in sort of that high transmission level. The second really is our very, very most basic infection prevention tool, which is our routine hand hygiene. So if this type of education is not something that you're currently doing for families when they're taking loved ones out of the facility, now might be a good time to start thinking through that. So when this happens, in the coming weeks, this isn't a surprise and you have a process for who's doing that education. What does this look like? Do we have flyers we can give them? just again, so that you and your staff all know if, Kim comes in to take her mom, what information are we relaying either verbally or in writing to her mother, so that they have the best practices and sort of know what to expect. All right, so what do you do with these residents once they return? What's the guidance here? So for residents who are leaving the facility for less than 24 hours, there is nothing special you need to do on their return. Quarantine at this point is not recommended. I will include the caveat here that there are some special circumstances where quarantine would be recommended for residents who leave the facility for less than 24 hours. And the specific details about that are listed in the empiric transmission precautions document that's at the bottom of this slide. So take a peek at that and see, but for the most part, it is not recommended. If a resident is leaving the facility for longer than 24 hours, at that point, they should be managed as a new admission when they come back. So admission testing then is really at the discretion of the facility. So if your facility is not in a high community transmission rate, you can decide how admission testing is completed. If you are in high transmission, testing for these new admits would include the tested admission, test again in 48 hours, and then a third test again 48 hours thereafter. I see a comment in chat here from Angie. We were told early in all of this that not only our county needed to be in the lower transmission categories, but also those surrounding us, as we have staff and visitors that reside in those counties. Also that we need to maintain the lower category, substantial or lower, for 2 weeks before we make the change. Is this still the expectation? So to the first point about the surrounding counties, that's very interesting, Angie, and I have not heard that, but I wonder if there's other folks on the line that have heard that same thing and can validate what Angie's asking about. Because I think it makes sense, but I've not heard that or seen that anywhere.
Yeah, as people are thinking about that question, yeah, I have heard that, and you're right. It makes some common sense, but I don't know if I can actually say that it's on a QSO memo or something of that nature.
Has anybody else heard this or seen this anywhere? Vicky's saying it can be used as consideration by the facility. And then Jody said the surrounding counties has not been mentioned in the CDC requirements. Perhaps it's a facility policy. Okay. And then to the point about 2 weeks, so maintaining that lower category, so either substantial or low for 2 weeks before you make the change, is that still the expectation? Jody said there was a leading age meeting and they stated that the 2-week criteria was no longer, I guess, in play. I don't know if anybody else can validate that. Okay, Greta's saying the 2-week recommendation is in the CDC FAQ. And Greta, do you know if that's still in effect?
I can take a look and see if it is still there. And if I find it before the end of this call, I'll put it into the chat.
I appreciate that, Greta. Thank you so much. Because I honestly, off the top of my head, I don't know. Awesome. Great conversation on that. I do think this is really important. And again, what our CDC guidance says, what the state says, and then ultimately what's up to the discretion of your facility. I think sometimes teasing apart what's coming from where can be a little tricky, which is why I think these calls are really beneficial just for us to ask these questions of one another and really try to figure out what we can do, what we can't do, what we can think about doing, and the kind of data and information that we need to be able to make some of those decisions. Well, Greta, thanks again for doing some quick research on that for us. And Kim, at this point, I'm going to kick it over to you to talk a little bit about therapeutics.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Kelsey. Yeah, the other, so on November 22nd, so you're like right before the Thanksgiving holiday, I see this QSO memo and think, oh no, what do we gonna have to do right before Thanksgiving? Well, thankfully, the memo that maybe some of you have already seen really didn't have anything new in it, but I will go through what was emphasized in the QSO memo. The guidance for the providers is to ensure that residents have access to the latest COVID vaccines and therapeutics. And CMS is encouraging the nursing homes to increase their vaccination efforts and to review and reinforce their infection control protocols. Okay, got that. We all know that. Now, CMS requires nursing homes to educate residents and staff on the risks and benefits of the vaccine. Yep, we know that too. And to offer and administer the vaccination, the COVID vaccine. Also, nursing homes should ensure that residents who test positive for COVID-19, that they receive the appropriate treatments, so such as Paxlovid. And CMS, actually talking about leading age, I just heard this, that CMS has reported that only 1 in 5 seniors with COVID-19 infection are receiving Paxlovid, and that only 44% of the residents are up to date with their current recommended vaccines. So hence, the White House, I see the Biden's push for a 6-week campaign on pushing the vaccine and pushing therapeutics. It's pertinent, right, to provide the appropriate and timely therapeutics to those that are eligible. So a resource, and I think I did share this before, but I really do like it a lot, is this resource link here, the Society for Post-Acute and Long-Term Care Medicine. In here, in regards to therapeutics, there's a lot of things in here, but there's a sheet on myth and facts of Paxlovid, fact sheets for your residents and families, a standing order for it, an ordering flow chart for Paxlovid, and it even has a nice 2-pager on the role of your medical director in effective prevention and treatment of COVID-19. So I highly recommend checking this out, especially since, again, I got the holidays, we got one over with, right? And so here comes the next one. Are we going to see a surge in COVID related cases? And if we do, here's a couple of resources. Here's a toolkit. Hopefully, maybe you could prepare now so that you can use these tools so that we could ease the outcomes of the holiday chaos that's coming ahead of us. Maybe if I hope the levels stay low. All right, next slide, please. Okay. I just want to lighten it up really quick here. Enough with the serious stuff. I just want to put on my life enrichment hat for a second and talk about holiday gifts and celebration ideas. We're so darn focused on influenza and COVID that sometimes maybe we all just forget that. Remember, this is holiday season. And I also remember families struggle sometimes to figure out what the heck does mom need? She has everything. And when I come in, what do I do? What do I do with mom? What do my grandkids do when they come to visit mom for 2 hours in the nursing home for Thanksgiving? So I left out the obvious, right? I'm not putting on grippy socks and blankets and sweaters and lotions. We know all of that. But I found a couple of others that I thought were kind of cool. That you could maybe talk about in your care conferences, maybe an e-blast newsletter to families. So things like succulent gardens, if you have those plant people, I think succulents are really cool. I like them too. Story albums, adult coloring books. But what I really liked, if you click on the link for the monthly subscription or box club here, this is like Graying with Grace, 34 plus ideas to give to an older person that is like a box club. I don't know about you, but I love getting a gift in the mail. So I think that would make a Residence Day to get like something in the mail every month or every 3 months from somebody they love. And then the other thing is just digital picture frames. Again, I'm sure you probably already see these in your homes, but what I like about this particular one is that I can add pictures to my grandma from, from wherever I am, and then she can see them right there on her bedside table or wherever that picture frame is. So she can watch what I am doing at any time when I add those pictures to the frame. So I just thought those were some cool ideas. And again, now with the enhancing your visit during the holidays, the family coming in, what are they going to do? Gotta love Wordle. If you haven't tried Wordle, please do. And I think your residents will love Wordle too, those that can participate in Wordle. And I also like this trivia site because, share it with your families because there's so much trivia on here. And if it's Christmas that you celebrate, and we know grandma, mom, and dad, they know what Christmas is. They know all of these answers. So play these kind of games with them. And then, of course, there's the rest of them. Oh, and another trick that we had learned that was very effective was, yes, we all know photos are great, but for the holiday, who's got the box of photos somewhere in their basement or somewhere? There's just photos in something. Bring them. Encourage your families just to bring some random photos and put them in an envelope and bring them with you for Christmas or whatever holiday is that you're celebrating, because I bet you they'll get a kick out of looking at those old pictures. Okay, so there's my lighten it up for a couple minutes. I hope I maybe gave you an idea or two. So we actually kind of started with this, and I think we're going to probably kind of end with this too, is what will you do differently for the next holiday? We did hear about some of the issues that happened in regards to the testing. Yep, the testing surge. So maybe that might bring something different to the forefront for the next holiday. But is anyone going to be taking any kind of special precautions? Extra masks at doors, hand sanitizers at entrances, increased signage, talked about increased sanitation on high touch areas. Has anyone had conversations with your staff on like the consistency of messaging with your residents on infection control? Because, someone comes in and they say, do I have to wear this mask? And yes, you have to wear the mask. We're in a high level of da-da-da-da-da. And then the next staff member says, yeah, well, you should, but it is Thanksgiving, so I won't tell. I know those things are happening out there as I've lived through them. So maybe having those conversations before the next holiday and using those kind of examples might cut down on some of those infection control practices that we don't want to see. And then I guess lastly, the next slide, please. Would be, what are you doing to celebrate? This is actually what I'd like to kind of know how things have been tweaked. I just want to give you my example of where I used to work. Holy cow, did we put on the buffet of a lifetime for the family and residents on an annual open house. It was spectacular. And to be honest with you, I don't know if we even do that or if we even do a version of that. So what do you do? What are you doing to keep the holiday spirit thriving? I'm wondering what kind of things you have maybe had to modify opposed to what it used to be, or maybe you're back to the same thing.
I think it would be really great if everybody could just share one thing that they're planning on doing in their facility. Even if you just want to put it in chat, and then we'll have a nice list of all of the fun things that everybody's planning to do for the holidays. And maybe there would be a new idea in there that you haven't considered and want to adopt.
I see the Christmas open house here for staff. They're still celebrating. And I mean, I love, because I believe you're right. We all absolutely have to have celebration. But have, I mean, like, for example, Dana, for your open house for staff, families and residents, do you have food out? I mean, is that like something that is still, I guess, I don't know, an acceptable buffet style happening when you have these open houses? Looks like we're still having parties. We have Christmas caroling kids coming in. Staff party, perfect, good to hear. Got to keep that spirit alive.
Absolutely. And I think everybody, I mean, little kids are just adorable in general. So I think, having them come in and, bringing that cheer and joy, if they're singing or passing out candy canes or whatever that looks like, I think can be a nice change from the day to day, the adults really that are in the facility, your staff, your residents, everybody, that having little kids, I'm sure can cheer that up. Another comment. So Crystal Lynn says they're having a holiday party for residents with Christmas presents, food, and if they want family, there's rooms that they can reserve so families can have visitors. And then for staff, they're celebrating outside the facility. And then she goes on to say we can still do the buffet style with proper infection control practices for residents and for staff. And they're decorating the halls with a contest so residents can help as well. I love that. That's a great idea.
Oh, that's right. I remember doing that now. Yeah, we had the hall contest with the decorations, and then some of them got in trouble from our maintenance department because of the fire code. So some decorations had to get put down. Oh my gosh, that brings back good memories. How fun. Good. Well, I'm glad to see that in light of, my gosh, of all of the COVID influenza, crazy 2 years that have been, that we've been having with this pandemic, that it's enlightening to see that all of you are still pushing through and having parties and enjoying your residents and staff and so on and so forth. It's good. And I hope that you find it's good to hear that all from your peers, that you're all still doing the fun things that you can still do in the nursing home.
Absolutely. And I think those are all great ideas. So if there are other folks that are doing different things, would love to hear what that is. So others might get some ideas from you too. All right. So we are nearing our end of the hour together. Before we wrap up, I wanted to save time to just open the floor for questions, whether they're questions related to what we've spoken about today, questions related to something totally different, open to any and all questions you have, if they're for us or for your peers. Now is a great time to ask those. All right, maybe while folks are thinking of some questions, are there other topics that you would like us to cover in future roundtable sessions? Anything that's a challenge for you, you don't feel like you fully know all the rules and regulations on, just want to have an open discussion about, we are all ears. So would appreciate any ideas or suggestions you have, because we always want to make sure these calls are meaningful for you since you are the audience. So any thoughts on topics we could cover in future sessions?
I was just going to say to Kelsey, if they can't think of anything right now, we did put the eval link in the chat. There's a space where you can add them in the evaluation too.
Yes, thanks, Jerry. That's a great reminder. And we do look at those every week as you submit them. So don't be shy. We're open to any ideas you have, and are happy to cover whatever you need. I got sidetracked reading this comment from Jody. I'm always struggling with antibiotic stewardship and getting people on board. Yes, and I know this is Antibiotic Awareness Month, I believe. So we can certainly add that list. Thank you so much for the suggestion. And hey, somebody else that agrees. So awesome. Don't feel like you're alone in your struggles, because I guarantee there's somebody else on the line who's probably in the same boat. And it sounds like antibiotic stewardship is a winner. So thank you. So Jerry did mention she put the link to the evaluation in chat. If you could just take a couple moments to complete that, grab the link to the slides so you can download those and have links to all the resources that we covered today. And then I'll pause one more time to see if there's any last questions, comments, ideas, things that you want to share before we close. All right. If you are not already part of our Superior Health Connect, this is a great online forum avenue to ask questions, to get involved. Very similar to this, only it's, you know, kind of on demand online format, but it still gives you access to ask questions of the Superior Health team as well as your peers. So highly recommend taking a peek at that if that's something that you're interested in. We are always posting content and pushing out new information here. So if you're not already engaged in this space, I would encourage you to check it out and see what all's in there. All right, if there are no other questions, thank you all so much for your engagement and participation in today's call. It is always so enriching when we can have these conversations and just kind of lay it out there, how things are going, give each other ideas and feedback. That's really why we wanted to set these calls up in the first place. So again, thank you so much for your engagement and your participation. The ideas moving forward are all fantastic. So with that, we will see you all same time, same place next week. And until then, have a great week and stay safe.